Welcome to Anthony's Outdoors, and today I am completely solo. No Courtney and no Hunter. So you know what that means. We're going to be on a true adventure. Alright, so I've decided to do this video a little bit differently, and in this one I'm just going to narrate the trip and basically just talk to you about the different spots and how I go about breaking down new musky water that I've never fished before, and just going over the local conditions, weather, water, all that kind of stuff, and go from there. I'm going to try to do this without any breaks. And just whatever comes out, comes out. I'm not going to try to edit this too heavily, and we'll see what happens. So right now I'm just explaining that we're going, driving up north. I'm all by myself, heading out to a couple lakes that I've never fished before, and let's get into it. So this lake was incredibly remote and difficult to get to. As you can see, this is basically just an old logging road. It's not even a designated like Forest Service road or anything like that. Just super narrow. And the boat launch was pretty sketchy, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to get into this lake. To get into this particular lake, you had to go through this river here. Super shallow. I'm trimmed almost all the way up, just idling through here. Keeping an eye out for stumps and stuff. Beaver Dam right there, kind of cool. It was super remote, like I was saying. I was 20 miles from the nearest town. And if you've been following the channel, you know that before any fishing gets done for muskies, you have to cheers the musky gods. So here's some summer shandy for the muskies and some for the fishermen. So on this lake, I decided I was going to go and look for the best looking structure right off the bat. And this lake was not mapped at all. And I basically just had to drive around looking for a good spot. And this island kind of stuck out to me. It had some nice rock points, some reed grass growing off of it, and some of the deepest water in this lake was just adjacent to this island here. My boat is actually in about 12 feet of water here, and I'm casting up onto a rock bar that runs off of that island. Right now I'm facing east, and just trying to develop a pattern here. This lake has a naturally reproducing population of muskies. So does the river that runs in and out of it. It is a natural lake. There are no dams. This is not a flowage. Super shallow, super weedy, soft bottom. And this just looked like a really good spot to start. So I started working my way around the island. Like I said, best looking spot on the lake, and you know, it didn't take long for me to contact a fish. Casted right to a pad of lily pads on the east side of the island, and made contact here with a largemouth bass. You know, not the target species obviously, but it did key me in on that, you know, the fish are using the cover close to shore, so that's good. And honestly, when I'm musky fishing, if I catch anything of any species, I'm perfectly okay with that. Nothing wrong with that there. As you can see, it's not a bad bass. You know, nothing to write home about, but fun nonetheless. And I'm using a Mepps Musky Killer here, double-bladed green on black, my favorite, Anthony's Outdoors colors. So I'll let that guy go, and here I'm basically just, you know, talking to the camera, explaining the situation. Again, natural lake. It was pretty hot. This is 4th of July weekend. Temperatures, you know, were already in the upper 70s, low 80s. Pretty high humidity. Was hoping for a couple thunderstorms to pop off, but right now that just wasn't happening. So I was, by the way, don't do this. Do not recommend doing this. My sonar died on me, so I had to switch batteries to get that back up and running. Basically, I was auto charting the lake here just to get a better idea of the layout. So after seeing that largemouth bass on shoreline weeds around the island, I decided to start fishing the shoreline around this lake. Now, this lake is not large. It's, you know, it was a couple hundred acres, pretty shallow, so the weed growth along the shoreline was pretty extensive. A lot of small pad, lily pad stuff, and then all the way out to about 4 feet of water, there was some really nice cabbage. super thick. That's where this bass came out of. He did not come out of the lily pads. He came out, you probably couldn't see it due to the camera angle and how dark the water is in this lake, but this fish came out of the cabbage, which was another good sign for me. It meant, you know, due to the high skies and dark water, the fish are hugging real close to that cabbage. So I started to develop a pattern here of where I needed to look to hopefully tie into, you know, a muskie. As I continue fishing the shoreline, here is where I started to get into some muskie action. This was like a reed bed that ran pretty far out into the lake, almost out to 6 feet of water. So that was really good looking. Again, you can't really see, you can't see into the water, but I did contact a muskie in these weeds here. I had him on for a split second and then it came off. Now, here's the problem with this is my GoPro decided to stop recording during the absolute worst possible time. And you'll see here later in the video I start complaining about that. But I'm looking up at the sky because I realized conditions have changed. I've now got a decent west to east wind and cloud cover. So there was a thunderstorm just to the east of me, and it was starting to bubble up, and I was really hoping it was going to expand west and bring me some better shade and possibly some rain. That didn't really turn out, but so here I am. I'm complaining about the GoPro and the fish that I just had on that I lost on the musky killer. And I'm also talking about the conditions, how the conditions have changed, and if I was gonna make it happen, this was probably when it was gonna happen, right? Conditions had changed. We got good weather now, and hadn't seen a muskie all day, and now we've contacted one. And by all day, I mean a few hours. I had only been on the water about 2 hours at this point, and this lake was pretty small. And if you fish fast, you could fish this whole lake in a day, no problem. But again, I'm just checking out the scenery, checking out the climate, what's going on, and hoping to hook into a fish here. But you know, it didn't end up happening. Didn't end up getting that fish. But at least I had a pattern, right? I knew where I could go back and find one. As you see here, the conditions had changed again. That storm had moved off to the east, and the sun came out back in full blast. And I decided to work deeper. I moved out. Now my boat's probably in about 8 feet of water here, and I'm working that edge, that 4 feet edge, out to 8 feet. And I ended up switching baits quite a few times, just kind of going around this lake, looking for any sort of bait fish kind of out in this, I guess you'd call it a basin. Like it said, it wasn't a very deep lake, but I was working deeper, hoping to pluck a fish out of some of the sporadic cabbage further out in the lake. I like to, you know, fish shallow and work my way deeper. Some fishermen like to fish deep and work their way shallow. Either way works. On a super shallow lake like this, it just makes sense to start shallow. Something you'll see is I'm always looking around. I'm always looking for opportunities to see if I can see fish jumping, bait fish schools, animals feeding, you know, like loons or eagles or seagulls, anything like that that's feeding on the shore or plucking bait fish. You always want to keep an eye out for things like that because that's a good key indicator, and sometimes there's muskies around those bait schools. Day is getting long here. As you can see, the clouds have all cleared out. I've decided to go back to that island because that looked like the best spot on the lake after fishing it for about 4 hours, and just giving it one more shot here. Well, with that, I decided, you know what, I better get out of here and get a campsite. I had to drive quite a ways to get to a designated campground. I didn't find anything on this lake that looked like a decent campsite without, you know, quite a bit of work clearing some brush and timber, and I just didn't feel like going through that in the heat of the day. And I knew of a campground about 30 minutes away from here that I could post up for the night and possibly fish some lakes around there. Again, going back to this channel, super shallow. I don't recommend this if you have a much bigger boat than me. Anything bigger, heavier than, like, say, a 18-foot, you know, fish hawk or similar Alumacraft, I would not recommend trying to make it through this channel. It was pretty cool, but yet pretty sketchy at the same time. Not to mention the road in was pretty haggard. As you can see how shallow it is, my boat's stirring up the bottom. Now keep in mind that this was 4th of July weekend, and I was the only person on this lake for about 5 hours. And the parking, if you even want to call it a parking lot, really didn't have a lot of space for a boat and trailer. I had to park my trailer in the woods, basically, just in case anyone else showed up. And when I was, you know, getting out of the lake here, there you can actually see it right there. There is another truck, and they had a canoe, which would be far more useful in a situation like this. It was a struggle with how shallow it was getting my boat up on here. I really had to gun it. But yeah, just 4th of July weekend, completely alone on the lake. It was awesome. Super remote. Here I am at camp, at the campsite, at the campground, 30 minutes away, and I am thoroughly annoyed. I'm basically, right now, I'm complaining about my neighbors at the campground. You know, I came up here for a wilderness type experience, looking for remote lakes, fishing remote lakes, hopefully camping on those remote lakes, and I had to resort to this campground for the night, and the neighbors were less than ideal. I have no problem with people getting out and enjoying the outdoors, and going to a designated campground is definitely a way to do that. But in this situation, in the view here behind the camera, I had a family in a minivan with the car running, AC on, and blasting Jurassic Park. I mean, full blast. I could literally hear the characters in the movie talking, and the, you know, iconic music. To my right, I had a family that was playing football and soccer out in the main road, and across from me, I had another vehicle with its headlights on blasting into my campsite, and they were just sitting in there because it was so hot and humid. So these people were obviously not prepared to be hot and miserable and camping. As you can see, I continuously am wiping the sweat off my forehead because it was pretty muggy and not a breeze in this campground. I decided that I was not going to stay a second night. I was going to pack up and leave bright and early and be that asshole and make a lot of noise leaving. And figured I'd get up about 4:30 in the morning just as it started getting light up in the sky and head to a different lake. So I got to this lake. We've fished this lake before, but I've never musky fished, and I found an absolute awesome campsite. On a holiday weekend, I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked, and I couldn't believe it. So I took a few minutes just to film it. I cut a lot of it out, but here's the view. Pretty steep getting down to the lake though, and the lake was a little low. It was hot, it was dry, but it was absolutely worth it getting this spot. So again, just like the previous lake, because I had not fished this lake for muskie before, or at least dedicated muskie fishing, I decided I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look for prominent features on the map. This lake was mapped, and just start building a pattern. This spot was a rock spot in a bay. The bay was about 12 feet of water. This rock spot obviously came up to about 3 feet, had some nice boulders on it and some weeds scattered about, and it just looked like a really good spot to start. And I didn't actually see anything on this spot, but again, it just looked great. It really did. And that's what you got to do when you get out of these new bodies of water. You really got to look at your maps, look at the conditions, and just kind of just start cherry picking, right? And you can see some timber in the water there. That's how shallow it was. And then here, this spot was actually the best spot on the lake by far. Where my boat is sitting, I'm in about 20 feet of water, dropping off to like 28 feet a little further behind me, and this rock spot obviously came right up to the surface. And behind it, to the right of that rock pile, was about 4 feet of weeds. Now the weeds weren't cabbage, they weren't real pretty weeds, they were that grassy, crappy shit, but on a lake like this, that'll hold muskies. And you'll see here that as I continue to go along here, I actually do end up pulling a muskie out of these weeds and getting them to follow. It was actually a really nice fish, probably mid to upper 40s. biggest fish I've seen on this lake. You'll actually see the tail kick right there. And then I go into the figure eight. It followed once into the figure eight, and then it took off. I'm assuming it was because of the shadow that was created with the sun at my back, but I gave it a good couple turns, and which you should always do. Don't give up on that figure eight right away. Definitely mark that fish so I can come back in the evening. Now that I had developed a pattern and I had seen a fish on a spot like that, I started boating around looking for other spots that were similar. As you can see here, another rock spot, weeds around it. Again, I think I was in like 10 feet of water here, 8 feet of water maybe, and I'm just marking these spots, marking the weed beds, moving along, casting along, just doing some recon basically. If I contact a fish, awesome, but my main goal with these kind of conditions, high skies and everything, was just to mark locations. Seeing as it was super hot and not a cloud in the sky, I decided to head into camp and just get out of the sun for a few hours, cook lunch and dinner, rest, and you know, make sure I could get out for the evening hunt and be, you know, all that I could be, so to speak. You know, just be hydrated and not super hot and worn out from being out all day in the full blast sun. So it's evening time now. I'm fishing the same double eights that I pulled that big muskie off of before. I had a small muskie here, probably low 30s follow. His nose was right on the back of the lure, but he turned off right there and shot away. I mean, not even remotely close to you know, finishing the figure eight. So I just figured, you know what, I'm just going to keep casting. Hopefully that big fish is in the area here. And again, just working that same area, you know, and just that milk run going from spot to spot. It's really key that when, you know, you're fishing those down periods that you spend that time marking good spots, and that way during prime time like this, you're not driving around wasting time looking for spots. You know where the good spots are, and you can go directly to them and start fishing them right away, and you don't have to worry about, you know, am I going to run into the weed bed up here, am I going to run over boulders here? You've already got all that mapped out. I wasn't getting anything on the double eights. I decided to switch over to topwater. You can cast them a long way. You can really work them slow, really pull those fish out of the cover if they're in a lethargic mood. And you know what? It's middle of summer. Water temps were about 74 degrees, 75 degrees on this particular lake, and I figured evening time, summertime, musky, you got to throw topwater, right? This was a JBO top rater. I'm not sponsored by them, but just figured I'd throw that out there. Black on black, one of my favorite topwater lures. They're fairly inexpensive and they work, and you can cast them a country mile. So just working basically over weeds here. You can't see them, but again, this is about 4 feet of water. Big, shallow flat of weeds. This is adjacent to that big musky spot. And I'm just chugging along, fan casting, kind of starting to lose motivation here. Not seeing that big muskie come back. That'll happen. Kind of sucks the wind out of your sails. You can see the pencil grass here in the background there, and I'm casting to either side and in front. What I like to do is I'll cast to either side, the front of it, and then if I don't get anything, then I'll bomb a topwater right through the middle of it, just to see if you can't pull something out. But I had a small pike hit out there, didn't hook them up, but this lake is loaded with a bunch of small pike. But I put this in there, nothing special about this. I just thought it was cool that the sun was silhouetting me as it was setting. But again, I'm back on that double eight Oktoberfest lure. Had a lot of success on stained water with that. And then, you know, finally I gave it one last shot with the top water at that big musky spot, really hoping to call something up, or at the very least get that small muskie to come back. But you know what, that's musky fishing for you. And while this was filming, I was talking to the GoPro, basically explaining that you know, musky fishing can be pretty tough, and really you might see some fish and you just can't get them to convert, and that's what happened on this trip. So the musky gods were not happy with my offering, apparently. But you know, I hope you guys enjoyed this type of video. If not, you know, write down in the comments if you don't like these kind of walkthroughs, breakdowns, and I'll just go back to filming and narrating as I always have. But I figured I'd do this a little differently, seeing as that there was a lot going on and not a lot of me talking to the camera. But if you guys liked what you saw in this episode, you know, hit that like button, comment down below. Check out these videos here where we actually catch some muskies. And as always, thanks for watching.